Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Greg Chapman Show. This is a show mainly meant for facilitators and trainers conducting workshops virtually or face-to-face. I've also come to add the word educators to facilitators, trainers, educators, and designers. So the common thread is learning and the transference of learning. So that's what we talk about. The idea of this long-form conversation is to help fellow educators learn techniques, change mindsets, even bust some facilitation myths, tips and tricks to find their way in here. And all of this from facilitators who are masters of their craft from across the world. So if you're starting out or you're an old hand at this game, you'll find something in here for you. Today's guest is Shilpa Ajwani, and Shilpa is the founder of Uno Mantra, a strategy, consulting, and leadership advisory firm that specializes in enabling consumer-centric and lifestyle businesses in beauty and fashion, wellness and healthcare, foods and beverage, home, wear, and contemporary living, helping them to grow faster. Just before this call, she was also telling me that she's also the founder of an organization, a not-for-profit organization called She Mantra, which is, which helps women-led coaching and consulting businesses. And she founded this in the midst of the pandemic, 2020. So Shilpa says she's about creating iconic brands, leaders, communities, and organizations which are built on purpose. Among the many accolades that she's won was the CEO of the year 2017, conferred by the Economic Times Polymer Awards while she was leading Tupperware India. Welcome to the show, Shilpa.
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. So nothing better to be on the Greg Chapman Show.
Thank you so much. The journey leading up to CEO of Tupperware and then the consulting firm that you founded, Uno Mantra. Could you tell, maybe we'll do this in two parts. If you could just tell us a little bit about the journey leading up to CEO, how was that for you? What enabled it? A little around the twists and the turns, and then we can take it from there.
So that's an interesting question. I think I love going back in time. I always discover something new about my own self too. I am someone who's born and brought up in Delhi, did my schooling here from Carmel Convent School, went on to study economics honors in Lady Shri Ram at a time when India was opening up, liberalizing, and those were very exciting times for a student of economics to really understand the dynamics of a complex country like India and how the impact of policy can change the way people think about the way they live, their occupations, their connection to the world too. And I think my sense of idealism, values gained from family, schooling, as well as this larger worldview gained during my graduation years, really excited me about launching a career which was based on things which were close to my heart. And it really was about, at that time as a young girl, unleashing my own entrepreneurial spirit. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur, which is why I went on to Delhi School of Economics to study international marketing and business, which was a new course they had just launched in that year when I was graduating. And going to Delhi School of Economics just also takes you to another world completely. And I realized that my path is quite clear. I wanted to get into the corporate world, start making a living fairly early, but wanted to do it while learning new things, challenging myself. The first assignment I had was for an Indian group as a product manager. Very exciting two categories, fashion and beer. Beer came as an add-on just 6 months into my tenure with that first organization of mine. They were very happy with the work I was doing. And the task was to really take, apart from high fashion from India, India made beer to the world.
Mhm.
So Indian food was really hot on the scene at that time. The restaurants were opening up, our chefs were getting recognition. And what better than Indian beer to go with that?
This is what,
So,
early 2000s?
oh no, this is still mid-90s.
Mid-90s.
So yeah. And I think, it was just a very interesting time to see everything changing from Hong Kong to Europe to the US. And very soon, my bosses wanted me to go and open our first offices in New York and in Copenhagen, be living in those cities and get a feel of how quickly could we expand in those continents. So as a 20-something, I think that was extremely exciting. Life couldn't have been better. The only concern was, will a blank passport get the US visa? And when that was done in one shot, I think, it was as if all my dreams were coming true and I was living my dream life. Then I happened to meet a Swedish gentleman at a social get-together, and life changed for a very, very different turn. That gentleman was involved with the startup of the Swedish brand Oriflame Natural Swedish Cosmetics, bringing that to India at a time when Indian consumers did not really have a great choice in beauty products. Business models weren't really that complex, and strategies were still fairly simple. In the midst of that conversation, I got to know that it's actually not a gas stove making company, which I thought Oriflame might be, but it's actually, first of all, a beauty brand. And on top of that, a natural beauty brand which sells through the method of direct selling or social selling. I had never heard about that model, and I was very intrigued. Growing up, I had heard my mom had given up her career so she could bring me up very well. Women didn't have enough opportunities to manage both a career and family. So they always had to make tough choices. And I felt that what this gentleman, whose name was Bjorn Olmer, was telling me that evening was very exciting, because suddenly women in my country, and men as well, could have that possibility of enhancing their lifestyle, contributing back to their families, developing confidence and a career, and not having to really compromise on things they love the most. And I was intrigued. I have the habit of really listening to my intuition, and that's got sharpened over the years. I didn't realize that was a very intuitive, very risky decision at that point in time, but I scrapped going to the US and actually decided to jump ship to the startup out of a basement at that point in time, where my first assignment was to buy the chair I was to be seated on, because they'd just forgotten to order one. So classic startup style, nothing couldn't be better. To bring a European brand, launch that in India. And then I spent the next 16 years there in various roles. But it, I think, was such a great time getting to know how an organization is built, how organizations are built and rebuilt several times over. They are really like a little baby who's growing and evolving into, a toddler, and then tweens, teens, adulthood. So that's just so very exciting to have lived through that entire experience. Opening several offices across the country, traveling the length and breadth of our beautiful country, and then the world, because the brand was present in 60 plus countries, was very innovative, and I really understood how ethical, value-based leadership could change organizations. So 16 long years, my last role there was a strategic role for the Asian continent for the brand. And then I worked for a German company called Forwork, and was leading their brand called Jafra Cosmetics in the country here. And from there on, went on to work for Tupperware brands, eventually as their managing director for the Indian operations. Along the way, had my son, who's 19 now and he's studying law. I really felt that I saw the world change around me, consumers change around me, businesses and politics and life change around me. But it has been a very beautiful journey, Greg, of discovering who I am and what's really my purpose.
Okay, I'm busy taking notes as you're speaking. We could take this so many places. I'm just going to pull back a little. You mentioned you were clear that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? And on the one, very early on, straight out of the gate of college, perhaps before that. And then you were also saying that you joined these organizations and worked for them. Now, was that by design decision? Where is that coming from? What's happening over there?
So of course, I didn't know the word intrapreneur at that point in time at all. And that's where it's coming from, that I have had the privilege of working in very, very entrepreneurial organizations. And that's where I also fell in love with the whole idea of human potential. I worked so close with people from, of course, like I said, all parts of our country, but across the world. And I think it was so fascinating to see how someone who could come in so underconfident, not really knowing why do they exist or what's there in it for them in life, and not feeling any sense of control on their circumstances, to eventually seeing that person stand up in stage in front of 2,000 people in an auditorium, inspiring them to create a life of their dreams. So I've seen thousands and millions perhaps over these years navigating that journey. And I think that sort of kept me back from that entrepreneurial bug, because I just felt every day I went to work, I was working for myself. I wasn't working for anyone else. And I was not just working for myself, I was working to give and create a better opportunity for all these micro entrepreneurs. And that's the only thing by design that I loved the whole concept of social selling or direct selling so much, for the opportunities it created, how it unleashed human potential, leadership within so-called ordinary people. I really felt that there's not a better place for me to get to know myself, stay humble, because everyday people surprise you with how great they are. And though they insisted I was their inspiration, but I think I had, thousands of role models who inspired me every day. So that really kept me going, Greg, until perhaps when I reached the title of managing director, and I was contemplating on one of my birthdays that it's been a life of success so far. How do I make it a life of significance in the next part of my journey on this planet? And this whole segue, from success to significance really was, I think, the reason behind birth of Uno Mantra. And then
Success to significance. Really like that line. Really like that line. Yeah.
Yes. And the day I got that, I think I was just so clear that that I want to really go out and do this, and do it in a way that helps me become my highest version, serve at my highest self, and explore avenues about myself and the world, which perhaps being in a corporate profile might limit you beyond a point.
Yeah.
And even though I was growing every day, learning every day, and contributing even in that journey, but I think you sometimes outlive what you were to become what you are meant to be. And for me, that happened somewhere in about 2018. And 2019, I really finally took the entrepreneurial plunge after 25 plus years. Uno Mantra was born, and I haven't looked back ever since. Really happy to go out and do the work that I think I was born to do.
So in a sense, you're saying, you took these steps, and at every step, it's like you're finding your fascination, it's just fascinating you, and then you take another step, and then it's fascinating you. And so this dream of becoming an entrepreneur is getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And at the same time, you're also exploring an entrepreneur, I hear you saying that. What I want to ask you is that you also mentioned intuition as playing a big part in the decisions that you took and leading up, to, I mean, that's helped you through your journey. You also mentioned that over time you sharpen that intuition. So how does one, or how did you sharpen that intuition? How did you recognize that, hey, you know what, this is a hip pocket strength that I have. This is something that needs honing, and this is something I'm going to go after and sharpen and then get it to actually work for you. So is it a process, or is it just meta intuition? Yeah.
I think I'm no expert at that, and I wouldn't pretend to be one. But I think what worked for me, Greg, is respecting that gut feel. When you get it, I think to just pause and not dismiss it, saying that, oh, where are the analytics? I don't have enough data points on that. It's just a feeling. How do I know I'll be right? Looking at the risks more than the rewards. We tend to do that a lot of time, right? Because it's a world of uncertainty we live in. Also remember that I was in a senior leadership role for the large part of my career, and the stakes are really high. One mistake is not just your mistake and your consequences. Yeah. And it's not just about your neck or your job like people tend to think it to be, but I think it is about all the people who are impacted by that one mistake of yours. In hindsight, you might call it a lesson, a learning, etc. But at that point in time, it could just risk everything, not just for you, but many people around you. So I really started to feel the impact of listening to my intuition very early years. It first started with the hiring process. So you have a candidate. You get a resume which is shortlisted, or perhaps you get 3 resumes, and then you get a very strong recommendation, perhaps from HR or from the executive search organization that's working for your company. And they say that we are sending you these 3 stellar, candidates, and it'll be easy for you to choose one of them. And sometimes there were these, not all 3, but perhaps 1 or 2 people who really made it. And some were strong in terms of their functional or domain expertise. The others had great attitude, coachability, team spirit, and perhaps maybe a notch lower on the domain expertise bit of it. And then when it was a very difficult decision, what do you do? And I'm a fan of not, sort of delegating your decision-making as a leader too much. You can and must take a lot of advice and counsel of people on your team, colleagues, peers, because that always helps you to understand the situation from different perspectives. But ultimately, as a leader, you need to take decisions and you need to own those decisions. So when it came to even decisions like that, I think I started to realize that in the absence of any other way to know, do I go this way or that way? There was something telling me, and I started to listen to that something. And when I saw that it started to be proven right, and other people started to come back and tell me that Shilpa, we were also skeptical, but you were so sure. How were you so sure? And I said, honestly, the answer I gave you, I don't know, but something told me. And that's something, when you respect it enough over a period of time, I think, your body has just so much of intelligence. It just starts to respect you back by rewarding you with even more and more decisions and information that go your way. So it's really like tuning in to yourself and respecting that. And I think it has to do with having a lot of faith and belief that, you are doing the right thing. The only test I allowed things to pass was, how does this match or go through my values filter? So if there was a dilemma there, then I was stuck for sure, because that was a no-go situation. So if there are values, and I love having, the whole concept of values for that reason, that they allow you to know what you stand for and what you stand against. And I think values plus intuition. I think that's a deadly combination.
That's a deadly
and that's
combination.
what, yeah.
I really like how you situate that within respect, respecting your intuition and so many other things, and the how kind of comes out from there. And you will make mistakes at times, but
Sure.
yeah.
And I made many, so it's not as if it was all right, all correct. And there were times where I must have ignored it or partly, listened to it for what suited me. We do that, right? I mean, it's just convenient. If it's telling you things you want to hear, then you listen to it. If it's telling you so much don't want to, then of course you can ignore it. But there have been consequences of doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So to the CEO bit of it, if I'm just going to go at this from a very reductionist approach and say, so what is the 1, 2, or 3 things that you see from your life that has really empowered you to get to that CEO? You were the CEO, of course. Now you've started Uno Mantra. But so what really empowered you to get to that position and, accomplish that, get that success?
To me, I think if I really go back and I connect the dots, the red thread really comes in the form of learning very early on to be a positivity oriented person, but more like a possibility thinker. So if there were challenges, there were setbacks, I built the resilience muscle over a period of time, which I think was extremely helpful. So I would say that to actually become a possibility thinker rather than a naysayer or cynical, I think I've been able to keep up my idealism intact. So that was very, very helpful. Right? So that was...
If I may just interrupt, sorry. What do you mean by you built your resilience? How do you mean that?
Well, I think, again, some of it was conscious, some of it must have been subconscious or completely unconscious. But, I never allowed myself to run away from a situation. I always felt that if I got into it and there's a mess up or there's a setback or there's a problem or a challenge, my job is to contribute to making it right, to take us to a better place. And whether that was at a personal level or as a professional level, because we are not two people, we are the same person. I think that really sort of kept me going, where many others just felt it was easy to just, let go and it's not worth it. And you can say that persistence over a period of time, starts to show up as resilience, where you are pulled, but you can not just bounce back, but you bounce back to a better place.
Also the willingness. Yeah, also the willingness to step into do. And sometimes I make the statement in my workshops saying a lot of us do not give ourselves permission to get uncomfortable. So we're always want to stay in that cocoon of comfort. But this is what I see you saying. So if I just want to bring a little closure to the CEO aspect of it, and then we can move on to the other pieces. You've seen the other side of the fence, and now of course started Uno Mantra. You've seen the other side of the fence. And if I were to ask you that as a facilitator who has grown, you're giving advice to a facilitator who's grown, just started, clocked 5 years, clocked 10 years, was initially training, who's moved from training mid-management to now training, C-suite people, right? And is just about getting in there. What are CEOs looking for? And you being a CEO, I'm sure you've seen a whole load of them. Information is no longer, knowledge is no longer king. Content is no longer king. You know that. Everybody knows that. You're a flick of a few buttons, you can get almost anything that you want in terms of information. I'm reminded Elon Musk has just said all the patents go out for free. And I was like, oh, wow. So knowledge is not king anymore. So as CEOs read like crazy, are really, really experienced like crazy, have been to a lot of them. I mean, I don't want to stereotype, but a lot of them have been to, Ivy League colleges and schools. And they have gone through several workshops in their time. So how does a facilitator, so I'll give a couple of variants to this question. So how does a facilitator add value to a CEO, or what is a CEO looking for if a CEO is getting into a workshop, which is around the space of self-awareness or self-significance or leadership. So these kind of spaces, what is a CEO looking for?
I think firstly, there's too much of a halo the moment you're called a CEO.
I like the way you start that.
I always urge facilitators to remember that when you go in, don't imagine that halo more than you should, because you are going to work with, serve a real human being. And I think what CEOs need the most, though it's expected of them the most, but what they need the most is empathy. A lot of CEOs are lonely, and I think it is true. I've been there. It is lonely at the top, many a time, especially when there are challenging times and you cannot be open about just everything, though that's your natural style. Just like you can't tell your children everything if there's a problem, in the family. The parents just have to be able to be honest with them to an extent, but they cannot expect the child to understand everything. So there's no point in elaborating on things, right? So again, as a CEO, though there are organizations where you've got boards which are very understanding, you've got networking opportunities which allow you to share some bit of it, but it isn't an easy existence. So firstly, walk into that room having empathy for that individual. So
what does that mean, empathy? And maybe if you can give us an example, if something comes to your mind right now.
Yeah.
So what does empathy mean in this context?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So you mentioned Ivy League. You mentioned, coming from a pedigree, coming from the best of schools. I worked with founders and CEOs like that. And I was called in primarily for strategy consulting. So there was this one example where I went in and the discussion ostensibly was about strategy. It was really that organization worked in a very competitive space, and there wasn't enough distinction for the consumer to understand the unique selling proposition, for the employees to really know how do they get the better of competitors. And you had a lot of stakeholders with vested interests breathing down this person, the founder and CEO's neck, literally, in terms of when are we going to get the results? When are we going to get the results? Pressure for him to really deviate from what he believed in with all his heart. The reason why he started what he did, and even the model that he was passionate about. So I walked into that door, honestly, thinking this was a strategic issue and an issue where they had not really defined their core proposition, their purpose really well. And that happens in most cases. But just a couple of conversations later, I understood that this extremely accomplished, intelligent, mature, sensible, worldly wise, amazing entrepreneur had a lot of issues in his head, which were just his. And the moment I started to see that in his conversational style, in his body language, in how he made, a decision one day, but then he called me the next day feeling unsure. So this was a gentleman who had seen and enjoyed a great degree of success. Anything he touched literally turned into gold till it didn't.
It didn't. Okay.
So, yeah. And that's where one had to sort of unpeel the layers of that onion. And as I started really going down below, so much of it started to come out. And that really educated me that don't walk into any assignment with assumptions. Even if the client is very clear on the brief they are giving you on what the outcome should be from that consulting assignment, do a little bit more homework and have a connect with the leader, his personality, his vision, and the leadership team, because leader and their plus ones, I think that's where a lot of magic happens, and that's where a lot of the debacles begin as well. So, so if you start looking at the symptoms without addressing the core of what's really causing the problem, that's really what creates an issue. And once I was able to have that sorted out in my mind and in his mind, he suddenly opened up. And the conversations we had were very far removed from company strategy. But we both realized that if we don't unpack that for him and help him navigate that bit about himself, he cannot take the company to the next level. That's where he was stuck. And the moment he started to understand that, he connected back with his core, because that's where he was feeling all over the place. He was feeling lost. One could really see him back in action and how. So that's where I would urge every facilitator, every coach, every consultant to not walk in with assumptions, not thinking it's a haloed individual who will have everything under control.
Yeah.
And thirdly, the only thing they need to bother about is the functional part of the transaction they are getting into. It's always more than that when you work with people, because hey, organizations are also made of people. So before you really can support someone on their own journey, I think it's very important to know where they come from, where they want to go, and then how can you be a catalyst in supporting them to live that journey and to really navigate that with everything that's going in them and around them.
If I may paraphrase that, saying not end to end of what you said, but some of the chunks that really stood out for me. So the first thing is, when it comes to empathizing with the CEO, the first thing is knowing that the halo is so big and not bigger. This person is lonely at the top. So going in there with that. Second, knowing that, I'm saying the necessary condition is knowing your job, knowing what it's about, and having the requisite experience, but also then getting an understanding about the pressures that this person is under. And I think what stood out for me while you were explaining this is the value ranking that the CEO is going through. I value something a lot, but the realities of the world, and then I have to constantly reprioritize and rank. Okay, this is my number one value, but hold on a second. I have to value rank that lower and value rank something else higher. And I think that's something that one could keep a year out for, whether it's in training or coaching. And I also like, you're speaking of assumptions and checking your assumptions, checking the other person's assumptions, and getting those assumptions on the table, bringing those assumptions out. Thank you. I think that really speaks to that question, and people watching this, because that's a big question I get asked a lot these days by fellow facilitators and stuff. So I'm saying that could have a direct value add to people. I want to change gears here a little bit and say, take a left turn completely. Purpositioning. What does that mean to you? Why is it a big thing in your life? Why is it a big thing in your life? If you could please speak to that.
So firstly, I'm just so happy you pronounced it absolutely right. Most people just fumble with the word purpositioning. It comes from the combination of two words, purpose and positioning. So when Uno Mantra was conceived, the name Uno Mantra really also comes from two words. Uno is number one, the best. And mantra in my world means strategy or something you need to do repeatedly and excellently to really become your best version or your Uno version. And why that name came about was to really remind me every day on what my purpose was and who was I serving and how would I make that contribution. So every time I am speaking with a client, I'm working to serve a client, I am really working on strategy for them or giving leadership advice. That's so clear in my mind that where are we going with this, right? So to me, I think purpositioning became my how, actually, Greg. So, but let me back up and say that for that, I really had to look at and think hard in terms of how I define my own why. And why I stepped out of the corporate world after 25 plus years. Many people thought, again, that was a risky move. Again, it was primarily intuition. And like I said, that hunger, that calling to move from success to significance. And the way I decided to sort of articulate my own why is, and I'll share that with you. I don't think I've shared that in the public domain before this, honestly. It's something personal, and then yet they say that your why statement can never be just personal or just professional. It's who you are. So in this avatar of mine, in this phase of my life, my purpose is to inspire all to create a world so that we all thrive together.
To inspire all
to create a world so that we all thrive together. Okay.
Not just survive, but thrive. Interesting.
Thrive together. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And if I just connect two dots, you're also saying that Shri Mantra is a not-for-profit that you started off in the pandemic, in this whole lockdown. And, if I connect those two dots together, so you're saying in this lockdown, there is a chance that people can still thrive. Wow. Okay.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel this whole concept of purpose is just so powerful, because even though it might sound like this idealistic, statement, and I'm no Mother Teresa, but it really is something that wakes me up every morning, because, in every way and form that I can really go out and show up as, when I ask that why am I doing this, it is to inspire all to create a world where we can all thrive together, right? The idea is, and a good purpose statement, theoretically, though I don't follow that rigorously, but it's nice that it says that the first part of your purpose statement is about how you would contribute. What's your contribution? So in my case, it is to inspire all towards creating a world and the impact of that contribution so that we all thrive together. So the contribution and the impact both come together. So that was my why. And then everything that I did, so what do I do? People ask you that question, so what do you do? Greg, what do you do? Shilpa, what do you do? So the why for me led to the what. So what do I do? I serve to create iconic brands, leaders, communities, and organizations. What you read out in my introduction. So so what do I do? I support, I serve to create iconic leaders, brands, communities, and organizations built on their purpose. And how do I do it? How do I do it is per positioning, which means supporting them and serving them to discover their purpose and positioning their lives and their businesses based on their core purpose.
So discover and positioning, right? The two content words standing out for me there. So discovering your purpose and then positioning what you do and aligning it to that.
So it's basically Simon Sinek's golden circle that really says the why, the what, and then the how. And most of us for all our lives are stuck between the what and the how, because to the world, that's what really shows up. And that's why we always ask, what do you do? And the next question is, so how do you exactly do that? So if I were to say that, I run a strategy consulting and leadership advisory firm to serve iconic brands, blah, 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 And then the next question, okay, so how do you really do that? But nobody has ever asked me, why do you do this? Okay, why this and why not anything else? You could be doing anything at this time in your life. So why this? And that's where my mind was working, that, I've had this blessing with the lessons that I've learned. I mean, one could help the world thrive in many, many ways. One could, inspire in many ways. But what do I know best? From 25 plus years of serving the corporate world, building purposeful brands, that's what I knew the best. So I said, when I have built leaders, organizations, brands, and communities in my work life, why don't I extend that and do that to multiple people so that my impact, their impact, our collective impact can be on this world. And if everybody starts living a purpose that is just bigger than profit for an organization, that is bigger than just their own selfish interest as an individual, we do really think about others when we think about ourselves. Look at the world that we could create together, and wouldn't that allow us to thrive together rather than run the risk of extinction? And the pandemic taught us that so beautifully. It was ugly, it was full of grief and sad and disappointing, and left despondency at many, in many ways. But I think the real lesson is that we're all connected. And doesn't matter who you are, where you live, rich, poor, man, woman, any gender, we're all connected. Call it energetically, call it in terms of karma, call it transactionally, but there is a connection. And the sooner we respect it, the better our world will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Sooner we respect it. And to me, it's a three-legged stool, mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And purpose being, I would say the biggest, a big piece over there. And as you're talking about purpose, another word comes to my mind, and that is ikigai. So as you were describing this, so why this and why not anything else, as you were telling me about that, to me, it seems like a simplified ikigai. So ikigai has multiple circles, and I'm seeing three circles coming together. What are you really, really, really good at? The 25 years plus experience you're really good at. The second one being, okay, so I'm good at this. I also like doing it. Wow, that's a cool.
I love doing it.
You love doing it. Wow, there you go. And of course, the economic engine and all of these kind of coming together, and also giving you your purpose. Now,
it answers the fourth circle as well, because when I did that ikigai exercise for myself, so I was actually conducting a workshop on that for some women entrepreneurs on invitation from across the world. And in that process, I actually said that the fourth circle, that does the world need it? Do we need more purposeful leaders? Do we need more purposeful brands? Do we need more purposeful communities and organizations? Right? Do we really look at business in terms of it does good to do good? that's good. So I think, so that is something which really
It's
spurred me.
clearly one learning for me, what you just said. So I have lots of experience in making a nuclear bomb. I enjoy making it, and I can get a lot of money, but does the world need it? So I think we need to be looking more and more at the fourth circle, right? That whole idea of people, profit, and planet needs to be baked in somewhere. If
And
I
that's where, I'll just interrupt to add this one bit, Greg, that people say that your purpose statement is timeless. For sure, it is timeless, but it's not written in stone, because as humans, we evolve, we grow, so do our circumstances. So does our planet, right?
Yeah.
Look, 5 years back, we couldn't have imagined everything that's happening to us.
Yeah.
We don't know what will happen 5 years hence, right? So I think a lot of people have introspected and reflected in 2020 and beyond, in terms of, was it all worth it? Why am I here? Perhaps for the first time, sitting in isolation, away from everything they loved, really go deep inside rather than running, and then chasing things on the outside all the time. We were left with a lot of time and attention inwards.
Yeah.
So those who made good use of it, I think really have looked at all these circles, and that's why there are many new entrepreneurs. There are many new career moves. There are many more even, country shifts. People even moving to another country to study something, to think about just traveling eventually. So there's so much change happening. And it's only because perhaps people never thought about purpose before. Just like many of us don't know what mindfulness is till you understand and you become mindful truly. Yeah.
And I can't help but think that perhaps your resilience training, that your self-imposed resilience training actually helped you in this pandemic, and helped you to not just help yourself, but other people, and thereby purpose, and thereby connection, and thereby what does the world need. With your permission, if I could devil's advocate this a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. And the way I'm going to do this is saying, I completely buy into all that you're saying about purpose and its importance. A lot of times when we get out of a workshop, in the moment, people also buy into it, and people are, wow, let's go ahead and do this. And then, like we spoke of, the contrasting pressures and the value ranking and all of that that's coming in, it kind of tends to fizzle out. So how do you, and I'm just going to try and bung two questions in over here. I'm also looking at my notes, bung three questions together. Oh, let me take a shot at that. Okay. Yeah. So the question is, how do you get people to internalize it? Or, just writing on the back of that question is, or how do you get people to go from, like for me right now, there was a realization, whoa, there's a fourth circle, boom. Now, how do you get people to go from knowing to internalizing and then doing? So that's one question. And then the other one is, what are the conditions and context necessary for people to internalize this? So one is that, okay, I'm going to do, and this is my action plan, and I'm putting a lot of willpower behind it. The currency is willpower over there. The currency is focus over there. I get that. But apart from that, how system drives behavior. I think that's where I'm coming from. So how do you get that to happen? So I'll repeat. So how do you get people to go from knowing to internalizing to doing? And then what are some of the systems and contexts required in which you can situate it so that this grows better? Yeah.
So that's such a complex questions for various reasons, not just because it has three questions in one, but because of the fact that for many, many years, we could not just survive, but ironically even thrive for ourselves. Our definition of thriving, of course, depending on how we've defined it, in materialistic terms. So doing well was your new home, your new car, your new Rolex, the gizmos you surrounded yourself with, and that started to become the definition of doing well as an individual or a leader. When I took that, and extrapolated that for an organization, doing well meant, being a market leader, having amazing profitability, great shareholder value. Your brand was revered, and then you grew from strength to strength in the numbers, right? So geographical footprint, present here, present there, blah blah. So it all is in the definition of how you define success, right? And once that definition then takes on it's normalized, and then everybody starts to think that this is the only definition of a successful life, of a fulfilled person, of a great organization. I think, that's where we start to blindly think there is only one way. And that's where we not only take those decisions for ourselves, but for the generations that come after us, everything from where they should be born, which hospital, and many times it's not chosen for anything else but even snob value these days, to the school we send our children, to the colleges that we would be happy if they go to the career choices that they make, to the partners they want to bring in to live with them, to the organizations that they work for, etc., right? So then, you almost start to feel like we're creating clones who are running after this dream. And this has been fed to us so beautifully that anything else anybody wanted to do was seen as an aberration. It was seen as an aberration by not only society, but that aberration was felt right in your own homes. So, and this is not just unique to a country, but you look at this holistically across countries. That's why you had all these generational divides, discomfort, arguments. You had two doctors in the family. The child was expected to be a doctor to take on the legacy. You must have got it in your DNA. You must have, seen us working so hard. For what, right? So we made our children carry that burden, and the story was told so beautifully, so completely that nobody could even dare to shatter, the holes in it. The ones who dared were seen as people who were crazy. People almost were waiting for the day that they failed. Mavericks, completely, and we created enough words for them to know that they couldn't make it. That's why they are the crazy crowd, and those were not good examples. If you had cousins like that, those were not the cousins to look up. Those were not the role models you could have in life, right? So this long-haired guitar strumming person wasn't really the right role model. It had to be the geek, who just wouldn't come out of the door to even wish you because he was so busy studying and acing his exams, for the nth time. So I think everybody grew up in that environment. Organizations grew in that environment. And the whole idea of, being successful was sold quite well. So I think, when I started this whole conversation of even purpose at the core, I wouldn't say it was meant kindly. And people thought that, okay, she's come, that's like the first bit, and she'll get over it, and we will move on to real strategy. This is the fluff. Yeah, this is the fluff. It's idealistic, and then who wouldn't want to put it in their deck to make it look pretty when they're presenting to the outside world who they are. Simon Sinek also had become popular, so yeah, just bring that in. So like we put these posters of vision, mission, and values across the offices, and then we forget about them. Okay, bring on purpose as an addition.
Just another platitude. Yeah.
Just another platitude, and let's get on with real business. So that's something that I still face because, and it's not that I am naive. I've built businesses with my own hands right in this country. I also have seen the difference between building on purpose and without purpose, or the purpose alone being profit and what it does over a period of time. And it might have served some organizations, some leaders for a certain period of time, but it's just not the model for today's world. And I'll explain why. Why we need a different, or why we need to reframe, the definition of success. It really starts with that. And then why do we need to connect back with our purpose? It's just because even if you look at it purely as a business person, look at what's happened to consumers. So you've got these digital natives who have access to all possible brands. Like you said, information has been democratized. It's not in the hands of a few. So I can go in and research. I can, understand what a brand is, what an organization is, who's the leader I would be working for if I'm joining an organization as an employee, right? And the digital natives can research anything. So if you look at what millennials and the Gen Zs really look for in brands, they are looking for purpose. And if they smell greed alone as the reason why a company exists, they are choosing to actually go in and pay with their wallets for brands which are more aligned to their sense of purpose and their sense of values. And we've seen enough and more examples of that. There's this beautiful company called Patagonia in the US, and they've made or led a very profitable business while being very true to their purpose. They care for the environment, and they have gone ahead and done things like send your old jacket back to us, we'll repair and give it back to you. Don't buy a new one. Right? We've got people who will spend a lot in R&D so that they can have not just a product that is sustainable, that is made with respect to the environment, is safe for the consumer to use, but they will spend that extra in also making sure that their carbon emissions are highly controlled when they are manufacturing that product as well. So you are seeing examples, and those who are able to articulate the story and tell it well, are actually reaping bounties and also seeing financial success. So there are enough and more examples now coming up where we are seeing brands that mean well, and they do well by doing well, right, or doing good. If that's easier to understand. So that's one way of looking at how the landscape around us is changing. Similarly, if your employees, I'm talking now in the context of a leader, see you as someone who just exists for himself or herself and nothing beyond. All the decisions are to make sure that my bonus is maximized. I stay in my own seat for as long as possible. I am covered by the media. There's a high chance that I will not exist for very long. And it won't be because you did not create financial success, but it is because the way you went about it just isn't acceptable in today's world. And when we will start to see more and more organizations understanding that, some will learn it the hard way, some will respect the changing landscape, and some only understand still the old language of financial gains. When they will see that this actually makes sense, they would start to make that change. So what I urge is that, I do a lot of storytelling, Greg, because it's very difficult otherwise to break stereotypes, to break the cynicism, where they say that this is too much of effort, but what will we really get at the end of it all? Show us the money. So one has to start with that view, and again go down to really asking and connecting with what are their values, what does success mean for them, where they are now and where do they want to go, and in their mind, how is that to be navigated? because I can't come in and start to change adults. That's not why I'm there.
Yeah.
But what I can do and perhaps impinge upon is perhaps bringing an awareness in terms of that this is the way that you guys are choosing. This brings with it its risks and rewards. And this is another way. Would you want to have a look at it? What are some other options? And it's a lot of questioning techniques. You have to go deeper, connect with them as people. What do they believe in? Because, for me, knowing is not doing. So the in between that you said, knowing, if it's not internalized, will not lead to doing. That's why most strategy conversations fail the moment the strategist leads. Because you've created awareness, you've created plans, you have given a roadmap, which looks fancy. But what hasn't entirely happened is the internalization.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of change management that has to happen. And that's where the hand-holding is honestly even more required than making the strategy. The C-suite has smart people. They better know their strategy and they better be experts in that. Nobody knows your life better than you do. Nobody knows your business or should know your business better than you do. Honestly, why are consultants or coaches needed? To give an objective perspective, to help you understand the alternatives available to you and help you pick. Once you pick, I think that's where my job really starts. How do we internalize it so that this is your idea? This becomes what you genuinely would love to do. And this is something that you could get good at doing. So what does becoming good at that mean? What do we need in terms of change in processes, people, what resources might be needed, et cetera, et cetera. And then the doing comes, which also is difficult in many ways, because just like an adult, you want to lose weight, but you can't do it by just imagining it or putting it on a nice deck, a PowerPoint deck.
Yeah.
You've got to make lifestyle changes, and it starts with something here and something here. Same for organizations. That's what I do next in terms of the knowing, the change management, which helps to internalize. Empathy is very big because you are expecting a lot from these guys. And then the doing, which also needs to be broken down into everyday processes and micro habits that the entire organization would follow, with role modeling from the leadership team. So that's how it's done. It's, yeah.
As you're speaking, I'm reminded of a quote I read, and I quickly Googled it up. It's by James Clear, the guy who wrote Atomic Habits. He says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Correct.
And as I'm listening to you, I think as important as what you're saying is also, equally important is what you're not saying. And what you're not saying, so what I do not hear you say is that you're throwing a lot of, hey guys, you've got to do this. This is really important for you. So there's none of that rah-rah. What I don't hear you say is that, hey guys, read the research. Here's 10 case studies. If all these companies are doing it, it's important for you also. I don't hear you saying any of that. I don't hear you saying that you're piggybacking it on willpower or on skills. Hey, come on, guys, you've got to rally that courage and be purposeful. So I don't hear you saying these things. What I do hear you saying is that, I'll paraphrase it a little differently, saying systems, let's just say the Industrial Revolution, what it did was, so around that period, the only jobs that were there was, just those few, it was either mechanical, so engineer or doctor or so on and so forth. So if you were playing a guitar back then, right, you'd not eke a living, right? But times have changed. Information has been democratized and so on, and the internet and all of that. Things have changed. So now, if you're playing a guitar, you can get paid for it. And how, right? As a result, what that's leading to is employees are saying, hey, if you don't treat me well, if all that I'm seeing is greed, if all that I'm seeing is a dollar, the greenback or the rupee, then I'm out of here, right? And what you're also saying is that the millennial, at the risk of stereotyping this hugely, the generation before us did not, for a large part of India, I'm just saying India specific, may apply to the West as well, but the generation before us did not come up in a context of abundance. They came up in a context of scarcity. That's changed. Everybody's got a television. It was a luxury. A lot of people have got cars, not a good thing, but everybody has it. So we're saying that the new crowd, the millennials and plus that are coming up now, they're not operating out of a space of scarcity and saying, hey, hold on, our bellies are going to be full. Now we're climbing up the hierarchy and saying, okay, so we're not just looking for money, we're also looking for, for a more fulfilling place for us to fulfill our aspirations. And showing them this is what's also getting people to be open for the change. And then you're saying you're managing it like a change management process where there are systems that need to be tweaked, culture needs to be looked at, you're aligning to the strategy, the way the reporting structures, so on and so forth. So I see that. And I want to pick on your experience because I'm sure that you've done this with a lot of CEOs and business heads and MDs. And if I just talk about patterns and say that purpose-driven organizations, what are the people at the top, the girl or the guy at the top, doing differently? What is a different outlook that person has? Are there any patterns that, so I'll give you one. From different places, different books, different dialogues, I've been hearing this one sentence, and I'll just read this out. It says, I don't care about the money. Even if I fail, I'm going to be doing this. And people that say the sentence, have this belief, are getting into more purpose-driven organizations, right? So, okay, that's one pattern. Do you see any patterns emerging in their outlook and what they're doing? And I'm talking about people at the top.
So a lot of these conversations or these purpose-driven companies, one hears about a lot. It's a hot topic at Silicon Valley now for the last few years, and that was the hotbed of technology, of geeks, of people who were outsmarting each other. And then that led to a lot of money being created. And you had all these new gen companies, which completely have changed the way we live and the way we work, right? And a lot of it did end up with wanting to become the biggest, the best, the smartest. And even when they started with having a purpose or some crazy wild idea to make this world a better place, to be either better connected or to have information organized and available, at the press of a button. A lot of that changed over the years. Again, like we discussed before, because the dynamics around you don't allow you to stay purposeful for long. So then you trade your beliefs, your values, your purpose for things which the world wants you to trade them for, right? And this was seen as perfectly acceptable because what does one do? You can't remain idealistic. I've got employees to pay salaries to, I've got markets to open. I'm now listed on the stock markets and I'm responsible for making sure the shareholders get their returns. So then they also fell into that particular trap, right? But then you have this new generation of founders who not only are, really looking at creating businesses which are seen as the next generation businesses, but they also want to create companies that are really seen as living the aspirations of how the next generation will want to live and work. And that's where the whole conversation around purpose started to gain traction. And when we started to see some success stories coming out of it, because the business world is always cynical and they are circumspect about how long will this last. Sounds good, it's a good story, but can it make the moolah? Can it pass the litmus test of being a real business? For how long? And now that we are seeing a lot of traction happening, scaling up happening, expansion happening of these kind of companies, the first ones to really come in were the Warby Parkers, the Allbirds, Patagonia, like I mentioned before. But if you really go in and look at also companies which we are all familiar with in many ways, like IKEA, for example. Unilever, they started connecting back with their purpose. Unilever has made huge inroads into bringing purpose back to the way they do business. So when even the legacy companies, the conglomerates started to understand this language and make changes to the way they did business, then it started feeling like the real deal. And no longer, the stuff some college kids do because they're idealistic in their 20s. So when Alan in Unilever stands up in the boardroom and says that we are really going to create a sustainable company, we are really going to seriously look at our carbon emissions. Our toothpastes are going to come in recyclable tubes. We are going to talk about real beauty when it comes to positioning the Dove brand. We will not tinker with how the models look. We will take real women as our models and allow them to feel comfortable in their skin without imposing our ideas of beauty. We will discontinue the fairness cream, Fair and Lovely, right? So decisions like that, which then the world, even the cynical corporate world, starts to see as, and then they started relating that to gaining market share, to seeing the brand equity improve, seeing the younger generation also start to feel a sense of alignment with where they are going as a big organization. Then you see PepsiCo, under Indira Nooyi, and she had to, fight tooth and nail to start creating a more healthier version of their snacks business. They spent millions of dollars in R&D on how to really navigate from just being a sugary cola company to really also looking at the well-being of the consumers in the future. So of course, the bigger you are, the more difficult it becomes. So that's why startups have it easy, because you can do it right from day one. And then just scale those good practices as you grow up. But I think this change will come. And even though it might sound like they don't really care for the money, I interpret that a little bit differently, Greg. I see that as saying that money will be an outcome. That's not why I'm creating this. I'm creating this so that children, like my child, didn't have it when he was growing up. Other children can have access to absolutely pure organic snacks when they feel like snacking. I don't, as a mother, feed them snacks which are high on sugar, on preservatives, on ingredients which are really actually harmful for the young people, right? Because I have an option, and today as an entrepreneur, I might be creating a brand like that. That's why you have these this brand called Slurp Foods, which comes out of India, created by two moms who were exactly passionate about doing that for the children of tomorrow. Right? Slurp Farm, sorry, not food, Slurp Farm. And that's, the change that has started to come. And these moms don't get laughed at any longer. They are seen with respect, and they have started to get traction. And even though the brand is more expensive in the eyes of a few versus, what you get, in your regular kirana shops, but they know which consumers they are appealing to. Their positioning is clear because their purpose is clear. Right. So change is always slow to come because you're talking about societal change, values changing. Climate change is a very big issue. And if you don't change now, there might not be a tomorrow. So sooner than later, you will see a lot more happening. So they do care about the money. Not everybody is a not-for-profit, but it's different because money is an outcome. It's not the reason why you exist.
I have a bad example that comes to our mind, but very quickly, and we're also drawing to a closure. In the previous century, wearing a fur hat, a fur cap was, only the rich could afford it. And then companies in Paris, advertised that, you could have it on so-and-so EMIs, and even the not so rich started having fur caps until the rich realizes that, it's no longer a status symbol. Everybody's wearing. The poor are wearing fur caps. So one guy in Paris invented a silk hat, and lo and behold, everybody started wearing a silk hat. So I'm reminded of that in as much as saying it's the fashion statement. How are you, the people responsible for starting the fashion right up front, they have a lot of power. So yes, the Warby Parkers of the world hold and wield a lot of power, but you also have the HULs of the world that are seen as legacy. And the moment they or companies like them pick it up and start moving, I think that's huge responsibility. So it's actually taking it away from the individual and saying, so there are these big organizations that also hold the responsibility of doing it. In closure, just wanted to ask you quick 3 rapid fire questions. Now, and there's so much more I wanted to ask you, but and so many places we could go. While you're working with executives, while you're uncovering their purpose, and aligning the strategy and aligning actions, one of the indispensable tools I'm assuming that you'll be using and have refined and honed is questions. So, and I'm looking at it that, facilitators could also take that away and probably use some of that. So what are some 1, 2, 3 really powerful questions that you would use that get people to think about their purpose, that get people to internalize that purpose? So think about, okay, but how do you, if you could think of a few questions that help people internalize that purpose, so that would be really nice.
Sure. So like I said, we could easily go back to the way a purpose statement can be defined. It has those 2 parts, the first being contribution and the second being impact. And if we were to break that up into 2 questions, we could ask anyone. The first would be, what do you think would be your contribution?
What would be your contribution?
To those around you, yeah? And secondly, what is the kind of impact that contribution would make to those who you want to impact?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So when we start to, answer those, I think it can take you to a very beautiful place. It looks very simple on the surface, but I have seen people having big dilemmas and sleepless nights because they've never really thought about their existence like that. So, like I said, we are so defined in, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I am this MBA from the Ivy League, I am this hotshot CEO, those are garbs or masks that we wear, but who's the person inside? And so what's your contribution and what would be the impact on those you want to impact? I think those would be 2 very, very powerful ones. Combined together, you can just ask, why do you exist? So,
but I'm also thinking, start with why you exist, break it down to these 2 questions, come back to why you exist.
Exactly. Got it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What, as a consultant, what book do you gift most often?
Honestly, I don't have one favorite because, I look at each of my clients as being very unique. Their situations are also very unique. And that's where, the gift would change because, again, intuitively, I would think about, okay, what would he need, what would she need, and then really go for it. So like this morning, I was looking or thinking about clients who just have featured on the cover of Fortune 40 Under 40. And I thought that I would gift them a certain book, because that really has everything that we've been discussing the last few days. And I felt as if that book was written to just summarize our discussions and leave it, so that I don't have to create, another heavy document for them to really.
Sorry, I missed the name of the book. 40.
Yes, I haven't told you that.
Okay.
So they were featured on the Fortune 40
Okay.
Under 40 list.
Okay.
And the book that I was thinking for them was The $1 Trillion Coach. It's a story of Greg Chapman. Yes. And I think, some of the things those said and explained very simply would be just so relevant for them if they were to take it with them and see that really getting reflected as not just learnings, but easy things to just even refer to and do on an everyday basis.
Okay. All right. And lastly, is there a message that you'd like to leave our viewers, people watching this podcast, people out there that have a say in building the company, building the organization, that have a say in facilitating that change? Broad brushing it a little bit, but is there a message that you'd like to leave the viewers with?
That's a really interesting question. So what I would say is that let's work together so that we thrive together. I go back in a way to my purpose, but I somehow love the word thrive. And, that could be construed in different ways. But imagine if a facilitator would come into a workshop thinking about not just the immediate outcome or the objective, but really about how do I create a mindset shift? How do I create or just not impart the skills through this workshop, but facilitate in a way that I really get them to take a deeper look as to who they are, why do they exist. Even as they leave, that's where I would say that reflection during that workshop could lead to sometimes even permanent changes in one's life and lifestyle. And that's what I feel trainers, educators, facilitators are capable of creating. So not just look at the intervention in a transactional manner, but really looking at creating deep-rooted change, because a good facilitator has that power, and I have seen that happening for myself as well. So I'll just, though it's just a closing, but I'd like to say that in a communication skills, no, it was like a sales skills workshop, yes, that I was a part of. We had a facilitator who came in, and as one of the assignments during that entire 3-day workshop was that this is your product. As a team, you've got to come back the next day and pitch this product so that we buy it. And all of us worked extremely hard, and we really honed our presentations. And this is like many years back. We came in and we started to present. The facilitator actually stopped us in the first 2 minutes. And they said, or he said that, what was the brief? And we said we had to pitch this product so that you would buy it from us. And we're doing a great job. See, it has everything about the product. We haven't missed out anything. And it was fun, and it was cute, and all of that was taken care of. And he said, but what you've just slapped me with are a lot of features of this product. You haven't told me how my life would change if I buy that from you.
No.
He just had to say that. And we actually went back. And that day we understood that it's not about you or your product. It's really all about the consumer. Yeah. And the way you approach that, it's not about making that sale or earning your bonus, but it's really about leaving them with something that they will be thankful to you for. Sometimes they know they need it. Sometimes they don't know they need it. But like a good salesperson, I think a good facilitator will know this, and they will do this. So that was life-changing for me in many ways. And something of what I do today, I think, had its roots in that workshop, which was ostensibly on sales skills.
Oh, interesting. Shilpa, thank you for taking time, and thank you. I've learned so much, and I'm sure the huge takeaways for our viewers, huge takeaways certainly for me. Once again, thank you for your time. But there's so many places that I wanted to go with this, and looking forward, no expectations, but someday it would be nice to unpack those so many other things, right?
Sure.
So thank you very much, and you have a good day ahead.
You too, Greg, and thanks for the invitation. I thoroughly enjoyed sharing my life, my work, and my purpose with you and your audience today. Wish you all good luck, stay safe, and do well.
You too. Thank you.